It's not only our country but the entire world, a problem of certification of our society. I don't want to say that those stratas will be antagonistic like a class war. I want to say that there is a process of certification of the society, and the fourth scientific and technological revolutions will only augment this process. So we are generating contradictions in the society, conflicts, and so forth, so on. I don't think it is the case. And for the first time that I would like to pronounce the phrase, which I have been thinking of for a long time, it is necessary to, we need to provide for a managed certification of the society. What do I mean by managed certification, control certification? Until now they discussed the issue how we would, happy we would be if we embrace with China. By the year 2025, China would replace 25 million jobs for robots. We also proclaimed certain parameters in the message of the President of the Nation that we would replace 10,000 million jobs with robots. I ask you a question. What professions will be replaced with robots? Those professions will be replaced who are non-qualified, like, say, guardsmen, miners, and drivers. Can this category of people be retrained into programmers, scientists, or others with high intellectual component? No, we understand it's true. These are the people which would create a certain social burden on the entire society and will generate a huge number of conflicts. What the question, what is to do with them? The answer is as follows. In my books, I have written many times that Soviet Union was a state of happy misery. What managed certification is all about? That means that in compliance with certain unsurmountable complex of requirements of people which cannot be developed through education or any other forms, it would be necessary. You have 30 seconds. Well, I'm almost done because I have already spoken what I wanted to speak of already. What we are supposed to do would depend on what tasks we will formulate for ourselves, and then the measures will be defined. Thank you. We will definitely discuss all those bullet points. I was, control certification is something which I am not happy with. Who will manage it? Who will control it? I would like to be the manager rather than the managed one, but it may be that I will not be qualified for that role. Who knows? Okay, now I would like to give the floor to the chairman of the board of directors of Eurofinance, from Yakov Mirkin. Yakov Moiseyevich Mirkin is a known Russian economist, financial wizard, and you have the time, you have the floor. I want you stick to the what to do. Speaking about the future through a scenario, my first scenario with the probability 10-15% is the closed economy of this country, administrative economy, and today the role of the state is 70% in banks and in the real sector of the economy. So the economy with the government participation 80-85%, this is already something different. Now, in the second scenario, with a probability of 25-30%, is semi-closed, stagnating economy, very volatile, depending on the exogenous. Third scenario is Franco, and of the 16 years attempt to create economic miracle in Spain, infrastructure, partial economic liberalization. And the fourth scenario, most unbelievable and probable, 5-10% probability, is the unexpected change, the miracle of super speed growth and economic liberalization, something which we tried to do in the company of Boris Titov to develop an alternative economics strategy, a strategy alternative to the one which is different than the strategy of slowing down, and which has been leading us to numerous orders of the Russian economy to develop something new. So these are the four scenarios, and this is the objective. Instead of the policy of dividing the shrinking pie, the increase the quality, duration of life, because the average life expectancy 70 years is places us on 96th place in the world. So we have tools. There should not be any unpopular reforms, but each reform should result in the increase of quality of life, development of the government, finance, development. Speaking about development, the macroeconomic engineer creates a structure where each economic tool serves a specific objective, increase of the modernization and quality of life. What is the big idea? This is the economic liberalization, liberation of the business, giving the possibility, a chance to grow. And the second phase, when the economic starts to grow, there is a chance to pursue those structural reforms which are not possible now, moving the property, independent courts, and so on. So so our economy looks like a big elephant. Everything goes against the growth. Well, the idea is now to start it and get it moving, and in the course of moving to address those issues which are presently unsurmountable and decidable, because we should do it gradually. We should do it in a combination, because if you apply any economic tool independently, then the results can be unexpected. Like immediate access to currency with the excess of rubles conversion into currency and capital flight. We cannot now use the surgical intervention of the state, which used to be in all cases of super fast economic growth, where the system economic was tuned by surgical life, and then there are a number of cases of this kind, the European economic, Asian economies. In all cases, there should be the authorship of the economic miracle, who the author of the Russian economic miracle, who is likely to happen. Maybe we'll know that. And this is the formula of the economy of growth. It is not something which we invented. It's a very regular, at least 15 economists have gone through this way. There are points of growth, what we speak about policy, agrarian policy, industrial policy, development with specific prerogatives, because government normally are engaged in day-to-day work. Macroeconomic programming, of course, and then all those stimuli for the growth which are necessary to create appropriate environment for business, which would be, positive life enduring. Decrease on interest rates, gradual decrease, reform of our financial system. Our financial system is 2 or 3 times less than the requirements of Russia. Russia takes the 8th or 10th place of GDP, and financial system has never was more than 0.6% of total of the exchange rate of ruble, which stimulates the growth, suppression of non-monetary inflation, great taxation stimulus, easy when you when you reduce the taxation burden, from 36% to GDP, the Russian economy would not go. So 32 is perhaps good enough. In the case of the super fast roads, it should be the tax burden, speeded up amortization, and reasonable customs policy, very strict regulations, the regulatory burden. Well, criminal quote unquote of administrative violation grew in volume by the factor of 3 since the moment of their inception. As a result of the fact that business has reduced risk, has reduced tax burden, everything stipulates growth. The rate of saving, because 23% of investment to the GDP is not sufficient for the growth of the economy. We can dream about 47% of saving rate as in China, but at least we'd like to have 28, 29 to 30 of investments to the GDP. So as the economy goes into the growth mode, the development of the more market-oriented environment goes under the 70% of the share of the state. It could be done about 20-25% share of the small business in GDP is very shameful. So for direct foreign investment, when it's the economy which grows at the rate of 5-6%, cannot stop. No matter what conflicts, he would definitely enter into this economy, and that should be calculated for a long term for the growth of the opportunities of numerous elements of the population, because Russia has 130 million people. We have to get the Russian population busy, other than those who are engaged in the hydrocarbon sector. So those are the KPI of the economy of growth. They are different from those values which exist today. The key idea is that if you tend to crawl, then you save, but if you want to run, then all your body should be tuned for exercise, for quick movement, and that's what we think about the tuning it using economic stimuli. Revival of relations with other countries, freezing of conflicts with other countries. There is a standalone subject matter which I would like to discuss: how to grow big financial machine which would be adequate into the economic machine and which would liberate us from dependence on external investors. When you take the dynamics of the exchanges of Russian ruble and Brazilian real, whatever happens in Russian barrel, their peril, the level of correlation 0.9. And in all that, I would like to say the key idea of the growth, the increase of the average life expectancy, leveling out conditions for life across Russia, because in the Republic of Tova, man expectancy life is 58, and women live for 64 years. And the economic liberalization at the start, and then addressing of structural issues, and political liberalization may follow, and that would be followed by our model of collective behavior, because we live in a country where people love the state, because 85% of the population, in case all polls would like to, there should be more state in each and every aspect. These are the key ideas of an alternative economic strategy which has been developed for 2 years already, the alternative to Kudrin, as a part of the Titov program, the economy of growth, and which from our point of view is systemic treatment, because none of those tools could be applied in isolation. And the last statement: microeconomic engineering in each of its point of growth, say decrease of tax burden, would find tens of tools, technical tools, how to accomplish it, how to make the loan facility acceptable to small and mid-sized businesses and regions.
I should say that Titov's program, in my opinion, is more or less balanced. Another thing is there I see a mix of institutional aspects, the weaknesses which we have, like concerning the private property, and then, let's say, a reduction of taxes. These are the problems if the peculiarity is such. In terms of culture, there is no independent court and independent practice for use of court verdicts. This is a serious issue, and perhaps it will take a generation to overcome this problem. And I don't exactly understand what could be done here. For my experience of talking to small and medium-sized business, they are scared to do something long-term, and they are scared even those who have really very, very serious protection, because they consider it is not very reliable and something needs to be done. It's understood that we live today, but if you live with one day, you can't think about development. And I would like to underline that we are in a desperate state. We never found ourselves when the world is developing twice, 3 times, or even 4 times faster as compared with Russia. And this is really a scandal. And this is the exit from stagnation or recession. And Putin, it's a well-thought decision. Yeah, we can expect for a generation to solve the issue with the private property or independent courts or with a struggle with corruption, because the basic trend is 85 or 75% of presence of state everywhere. And you can't do these things today. Who has, not economists are in charge here. It's courts or lawyers. If we acknowledge the priority of such structural issue, macroeconomists, it is senseless to get together here and discuss something. We have to wait when someone will take charge. And the idea is very simple. These ideas, they are much easier to settle in dynamics when the economy is developing. Who is going to put it on the move? We have prepared a summary of technical recipes which would put this mechanism on the move. And the probability is 5 to 10%, and I said this is an absolutely ideal design, and the possibility is very small here. But the rest scenarios, either it is the administrative economy or you find ourselves in a deadlock. Not so much opportunities. Yes, it was very important to offer alternative policy to the society so that it is available, that could be discussed and could influence. Thank you. Yes, and actually someone would say we need society for that. Otherwise, you are proposing to an individual who has to change something. Yes. I read an article in the newspaper, and suppose if Mr. Putin wins the election, how he's going to correct the errors of his predecessor. So Igor Nikolaev, my good friend and a wonderful Russian economist, and I'm expecting specific answers. So what needs to be done? I have a plan of my own, but I'm hiding it. What needs to be done to initiate this growth, and where is the source for this? Yes, there's no matter with money. There's a lot of money. They will get money only under the circumstances that you don't have to pay back. Otherwise, it's very difficult to choose where to invest and what to do. Mr. Nikolaev is having the floor. Just a second to upload the presentation. Ruslan Semenovich demanded only 3 slides. Although my previous speakers, they actually used more slides, but in 3 slides, just it's difficult to answer this fairly simple question, how to accelerate the economic growth. But yes, the demand was spoken out, so 3 slides. Well, I'm not guilty, but 1 slide, although there was an appeal what to do, I need to make an introduction. Years of 2015 and 16, yes, many hoped, and there was an illusion that the crisis is already in the past, and we are steady growth, 1.5% in 2017. I have a different viewpoint, and I believe I'm not alone in my understanding, although if we proceed from the fact that it was a structural crisis aggravated by the fall of prices for oil and sanctions, of course we need to acknowledge that it is a strike back. It's a correction and nothing else, because all structural problems due to which, let's say starting from 2012, we entered into this crisis, and these tendencies remained. So have we changed this raw material economy direction? We never demonstrated any positive figures. The proportion of and disproportions of the pension system, they were also aggravated, and these structural disproportions, they were growing for years, and it's very difficult to rectify that in limited periods of time, plus the negative shocks. And we had this strike back, and it's hard to say what needs to be done, but let's talk about one key direction. Yakov Maisevich mentioned this, and this is a key direction. This is a tax system, tax burden. And there's no need to invent something exotic to answer the question what needs to be done. And I recollect the fact that at the Soviet time, everything seemed to many, if we invent some kind of a planned indicator like commodity product or GDP, so every problem will be settled and solved, and something we need to invent to change the situation. Unfortunately, we need to take charge and work with many things, and Mr. Mirkin identified many directions, and the key thing is taxes. Lately, we conducted measurements. We work with the Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, and the tax burden is growing, and we promise we remember all the promises, but the tax burden sometimes is associated with the level of main tax deductions. But this is how much you pay as relative to how much you earn, and you have to reduce tax burden. And the business and Rostat conducts these polls, and what kind of problems, what impedes or prevents you from investment activity, and two factors would be chosen. This is uncertainty in the economic situation and high tax burden. How to reduce the tax burden, but important things is just to reduce, and under conditions of stagnating economy or economy which lags back, yes, and Ruslan Simonovich said that every year we are left behind, and our share is reduced in the global GDP. And it was growing up to 2008, but now this 3.2% is even less than in 2000. And these are the conditions of the kind of movement we found ourselves. And those liabilities, and we entered into another stage of the arms race, and there is no miracle, and there's no nothing, there's no anything exotic here, and there will be no economic growth. There wouldn't be any miracle in the economy under these circumstances. Okay. I wouldn't agree that those were miracles. Those were not miracles. This was very clever work, strategically assessed. And what needs to be done to reduce taxes, and there are lots of examples in the global practice how it worked. Let's choose Ireland, for instance, in the middle of 80s, last century, when taxes were dramatically reduced and the growth of economy went up from 2.5 up to 9%. And in other countries, so as an example, I can show their income tax. We have excellent example. At the crisis of 2008, the income tax was reduced from 24 to 20%. And that was a very good measure, which had very serious consequences. And to restore this privilege on property tax could be also done, and you can do it right now. And not to increase the taxes for the income of individuals, and now they want to increase from 13 to 15 or even to 16%. We are not talking about corporate tax burden. And the Vice Premier says, oh, what's the difference, 13 or 50? So it's not so obvious and visible. Yes, he mentioned that, but it's a real shame. He shouldn't have spoken that. And I got the third slide. It is very brief, but I believe it's very important. Yes, we can make many good things now, and those will be necessary steps. But as it is well known, the necessary steps become suffice only under special conditions, and now we do have such conditions. Don't indulge yourself that under sanctions you could ascend to those advanced rhythm of economy development. As an economist, that provokes a question to politics. No, economists should say a word, and nobody is taking courage to speak this. There wouldn't be a miracle of that kind. And here we cannot use China as an example here, and there's a condition. So discontinuous sanction confrontation, and these measures would bring the results which we dream of, the increase of the economic growth. Sometimes certain things seem clearly from the outside, and my good friend and the chair of the Council of the Jacques Safir, and we know each other for a long time. He's in charge of Russian economy and his studies, so we suffer a lot, that we heard a lot of advice from the outside and heard those people who lived in those countries, and they do something, they speak and they don't do, because it's different, and it was counterproductive. Jacques Sapir, the floor is yours. So let us have the first round completed, and then you will understand what you would like to say.
Well,
Jacques,
thank you.
I already, Jacques, I already to describe some weaknesses
Okay.
of Russian economy.
Okay.
And then what to do. Maybe who is to blame is proper question too.
Yes, I understood. Sorry to speak in English, but my Russian is probably much too frozen to be understandable. The problem of growth is both a problem of short-term or nearly short-term growth, that is for the next 2 or 3 years, but of course the problem of generating a long-term stable growth. And on this point, I will just say that, of course, there is a lot of structural problem which will came into the past for a long-term growth. But I began to give a lower weight to now structural problems like corruption. Corruption is, of course, something which is pretty bad, both on the moral and the social term. But remember what was the situation in the Japanese economy or the Korean economy in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. Both economies were highly corrupt, but both economies rose at a very high rate of growth and achieved nearly equivalence with Western economies very quickly, probably in 15 years for Japan and probably 25 years, but coming from a much lower level for Korea. So I will now switch to the first problem, the problem of generating a short-term growth. It's absolutely necessary if Russia wants to be able to change progressively its economic model. But this short-term growth is not to be achieved by the same tools that will be used for the long-term growth. Short-term growth, to make a long story short, is to be very linked to first the problem of monetary policy. The current monetary policy in Russia is strictly impeding any attempt to raise a rate of growth of more than 2%. With the level of interest rates, and what's more important, the level of actual interest rates, by comparison with inflation, of course, it's absolutely impossible to reach a rate of growth of, let me use the government target of 4%, but even that, and I think that this kind of rate of growth will be probably lower than that will be really needed for the next 2 or 3 years. It's absolutely impossible with the current interest rates and the current monetary policy. So the monetary policy is to be changed, and this is in quite a decisive way a problem of government. The second point is, of course, to engage in a much more aggressive budget and fiscal policy, focusing on high externally generating activities. That is, transportation, education and research, health, housing, and generally speaking, all life support infrastructures. It is absolutely well known and well proved in a very large number of countries that these activities are generating huge externalities or huge externalities effects which are fueling growth to a very large extent. Nonetheless, this kind of short-term growth is not what is to be aimed for, that is, reaching a kind of stable and long-term growth. Even if Russia could raise its rate of growth to 4%, 3.5%, 4.5% in the next 3 years, it have to use this time, to use these 2 or 3 years to some extent deeply change its economic model. And to change this economic model, it's absolutely important to understand that, of course, this is a problem of introducing new technologies, of developing new technologies, but some old industrial branches are still to be important, are still to be relevant for the development of Russia. But these branches are to be, to some extent, changed by the introduction of new technology. What is important is the quantity and the quality of the investment process. And if we are to look to this problem, we are first to look on the banking sector. It is well known now that in Russia, banking are contributing very few to the investment process. And that the self-investment by enterprise, but also loans made by some enterprise to other enterprise, or transfer and subsidies made in the frame of a holding, are playing a much greater role into investment than banking. And it's a very difficult situation because, of course, we have the general problem of transforming the savings, be they the saving of the population, of the saving of enterprise, into investment. And to a large extent, only a really efficient banking system could do the job. Now the problem is how to move from the banking system, which exists right now in Russia, to a much more efficient banking system. And this is one problem which is to be addressed during the period of short-term growth. The second very important problem is, of course, to achieve a balance between the supply and demand for new technological goods. Because whatever the innovation process you could have in a society and in an economy, if you have no real demand for new advanced goods, you will not have the development of new activity or new branches. And this is why the so-called old economic branches or the old economic activities are still to be relevant. Now, let me have a look onto, I think, the three most important branches or most important sectors for the stable growth of the Russian economy. The first problem is quite essentially to achieve a much larger percentage of processing for raw materials produced in Russia. Of course, this is something which has already begun. The chemical industry is developing quite fast, but this process is to be fostered, is to be developed to a much greater extent, and to some extent, of course, the process of transforming raw materials in Russia is something which is very important. This morning, Mr. Glaziev spoke about the level of transfer, of invisible transfer from the Russian economy to the global economy, to the world economy, and more precisely to Western economies, because Russia is not producing enough processed goods and is selling mostly raw materials and then buying processed goods which are more directly or indirectly made by these non-processed goods. So it is very, very important things to achieve a much larger percentage of processing. The second problem is, of course, to develop more efficient process in the extraction industry. And this is, to some extent, a field where new technological goods ought to be used. Let me just to speak about the kind of deep offshore.
Let me remind you that your time
deep
is
offshore,
over,
oil extraction. This kind of oil extraction is to be made in the future by robots. Mostly by robots, and already the French Total company is using completely independent robots to develop some heads, some extracting oil heads by 2,000 meters deep in offshore wells. So this is a typical branch which is to use new advanced technologies. And the third point, of course, is the development of new sectors. These new sectors could range from, of course, the artificial intelligence, the computer science, to the bio instruments or the new biofuels or even biomaterials. And these fields is, of course, a field where new companies are to emerge quite fastly. So, in the end, what is very important is to understand that the Russian economy in 2025 or 2030, if the path of a very fast, stable growth is to be followed, is to have, first, a completely different financing system and banking system, is to have a new balance between the large enterprise and the new emerging enterprise, and is to have a new balance, but not a replacement, between old traditional activities and new, much more innovative activities. But the real difficult things is to achieve the fecundation between the old activities and the new activities, and in return the feedback mechanism of developing the demand for new advanced goods, which is to be made mostly by the old traditional activities. Thank you.
Okay, Jacques Sapir has raised very interesting issues, but he's a very great range of recommendations, which definitely looks like a normal set of proposals, but This is for a long horizon, and indeed, I do believe that we should speak more specifically about our issues, because we're running out of time already. The Institute of Economics also take part in the battle of strategies, and this is something which we're talking about, and we do try to make develop specific proposals. We want to kill two birds with one stone in our Institute of Economics. We want to send a signal to the society that we, in our country, the three types of potentials, which are good at the level of the world standards. Natural resources, start with, it is used to the 100%. The fruits of this use are distributed greatly unevenly, highly unevenly, but the study so far looking patiently at this. The second potential is intellectual potential of the nation. Despite complaints to the Soviet Soviet Union, it has created a great number of good brands, and one of those brands is the education and science in the Soviet Union. And this connection we have so far intellectual, highly developed intellectual young, people, and this is used, and they have to, and the people of my age gradually leaving this world, but still there are some young people, bright young people, they are educated, but they do not have good jobs in their motherland. That's why they expand the gap between West and Russia, and you cannot criticize them, but this potential works. And the third potential which I want to speak of before I give the floor to my colleague, former Minister, Deputy Minister of Economy of the Russian Federation, Ivan Starikov. This is the potential of spatial potential, which is not used at all, and this is a great strategy for our country, because depletion of the population from people is going on. The life goes on in the big cities, and there is a discussion as to what to do with people who continue to live in small cities and towns, whether they have to be relocated into large cities or not. So we stand for special development. So we want to kill two birds with one stone. Well, we want to develop big infrastructural projects of roads, because these projects will connect, regions of the territory. You know, we have a country, well, Japan, for example, where 1 square kilometers, there are 335 people living on 1 square kilometers of the territory. And in Russia, there are about 7 people on the average living on 1 square kilometer. And these people are dissipated, and they do not participate in any, are not tied with any economic ties or no market ties at all. So, from time to time, the powers to be recall about those people and ask a question to themselves what to do. So we believe that high-speed motor roads, railway tracks would be the way out. We will connect the territory, and then the labor market becomes more homogeneous, and people would be able to go places and change their work. So aircraft should fly between small towns and not via Moscow. as it is the case today. So this is what we want to accomplish. And Ivan Starnikov, I request him to take the floor. Good evening, colleagues. It is with special feeling that I'm coming to this podium. For 6 years ago in the Wien Institute of Economics under Ruslan Grinberg here at the platform of the Moscow Economic Forum, we presented this project, which we baptized today Transsib Route 2.0, and Sergei Vasilievich is here. And last Thursday in the Council of Federation, we held a round table where the Minister of Economy presented a strategy about preparation of strategy of spatial development of the country. I would want to say that the senators and experts, presidents of former ministry, well, came across the experts and senators, especially Shterov was critical of this strategy, but nevertheless, before I would like to say that so I would like to, and I was confident that arms race buried the Soviet Union. The second arms race would put a full stop in the history of Russia, but we need to get out from the growing geopolitical solitude of Russia. We have unique situation. We are located between Asia and Europe. Russia has 17 million square kilometers and 9 time belts between markets with huge number of buyers. And this is a monopoly resource, but we use it very so until before we came to Sochi and discussed with us synchronous mortgage, and he told us, everybody knows how I like gadgets. It's great to call to Vladivostok or to Khabarovsk from here, but digital economy does not rule out our space. Without infrastructure, without railways and airports, our space will become to degrade, and our life of people will start to degrade. So why do we speak about the spatial development, or we're speaking about the special shrinkage of the nation? I stand for that there is no spatial shrinkage in Russia. It's nothing which can happen, because Russia, in this case, will cease to consist of the country under this strategy. So I stand for spatial development. And when here I see one belt, one way of China, I would like to add one way, one belt of Russia. And we have to balance, to propose the Pacific cooperation, which was by Obama, and which was erroneously almost damaged, torpedoed by Trump, but he was brought to his senses by transnational corporations, because majority of those corporations are opponents to China. So let us balance and give the corridors to those countries. They generate 40% of the GDP in Russia, could be able to implement a long-term project of international cooperation, and that does not contradict what my previous speaker spoke. The creation of a Trans-Siberian Consortium and involvement of money, and this is an issue of breakthrough from the blockade and sanctions, which economist Nikolai spoke of. And last statement: 80% of the population of the United States live within 20 minutes of the nearest airport, big airport or small airport. In Alaska, there are more airports than across the entire Russian Federation. What we see now when we get the strategy of special development, but the moment the plane lands, the tarmac, the plane happens to be in the embrace of monopolies. So they build the airport in Platovo. with the excessive infrastructure. Now the charges went by the factory free. What aircraft companies, they decrease the number of flights from Moscow to Rostov. So colleagues, it is necessary now to start to regulate those things because there was a corruption, all the number of seats in a plane. The moment it becomes 100%, then the correctness of aircraft becomes less attractive. So we cannot speak about short-term haulage aircraft from Moscow to Bryansk, Kosovo.
До Хабаровска и так далее, если не ввести дифференцированный режим налогообложения.
If you don't differentiate this for operation of different types of aircraft, which will make this market 85, 75 seats, it's about 4,000 aircraft a year. So finalizing my presentation, I don't have to demonstrate my flights because there are more than 3 slides, and in my heart I am still a student. And remember the slogan, be realistic and demand impossible. You cannot replicate Transip again. Soviet Union, and actually that replicated the economy of the Tsarist Russia. And today there's a mismatch of the economy which was created, the placement of productive forces and other things. There are problems with mono or one industry city. If we don't want to shrink, we need to construct new Trans-Siberian railroad with new technologies, with new logistical know-how, and there are 12.5 thousand kilometers from Rotterdam to Vladivostok, and create 8 million jobs, primarily besides Urals, and as far as Chinese way is concerned, so we can make certain links and connections, and we will actually be very stable, joining with China and with Western Europe. And let's be realistic, and let's demand impossible, especially now after the presidential elections.
Иван Валентинович романтик большой.
Ivan Valentinovich here is a romantic, and Mr. Putin, even before his landslide success, advised and signed to get involved in this issue, and we are very much inspired with this. And on the other hand, there are different other doubts. And my German friend, he knows Russian very well, and he said, there is a religion, you call it Buddhism in Russia, and you have another type of religion which is called tomorrow Buddhism, and actually that prevents us from making progress, but we still have doubts in this respect. Then Vladimir Filatov is the head of the Center of Innovative Economy of the Institute of Economy of Russian Academy of Science, and he is my subordinate. I'm not a director any longer, and I cannot give orders to him now, but will you be able to present your materials in 5 minutes? Well, the basic things have already been identified, and what I can add here is not so much. However, certain things will need to be specified, and of course, the point about the economic growth is the key issue. And unfortunately, in the course of the discussion, during the presidential campaign. We never heard anything decent. But the well-known speech of the president, and those who were interested, they know the program of economic growth. Yes, that's a comprehensive document embracing integrated viewpoint, and in general we share this kind of approach, although there are still points at issue which remain, how it is to be executed, and the issue about the growth, and what kind of growth are we talking about. And the president initially spoke higher than the global. It means 3.5 plus. In his appeal, 1.5 GDP to the end of his term. It means 5.3 annual growth. And Igor Nikolaev says you cannot organize that on the open space. And under any model, there should be some kind of a transition for 2 or 3 years. If we speak about the execution of the model of growth, proceeding from the ideology of Stolypin Club, you cannot do that immediately. There should be some kind of a period with 2 or 3 years, some kind of prerequisites should be created for that leap forward. Now, what kind of growth in 2 or 3 years? And we see that we need 6% of growth. So in this case, by 2035, we could reduce actually this gap for the per capita income. And the life standard to be higher, this is a fairly difficult mission. But actually, that's the numbers which will give us the desired result. And that's the condition to achieve more serious goals. So what do we think? The policy of economic growth is the comprehensive approach, and this is actually what kind of products and where are the markets where these products should be produced to somehow fill it in with substance. And the second issue are resources. What resources will be used for that kind of thing? And the third big issue and aspect, economic mechanisms and institutions, they should provide the economic growth, and that should be linked into some kind of a model. And I think Stolypin Club stands very close to that result. The point is the priority. And if we talk about priorities, we should choose 3 of them. So this is spatial development of the country. The points you were talking about it means the housing problem to be resolved, basically, and not as it is solved in the million cities, million population, but on simple houses, 1 or 2 storied, and we have lots of spaces in the United States, in Europe, and there are different areas. And in 20 years, to approach the 20 years, the European level, we need to double the amount of housing constructions, and that should be done through small businesses, construction of separate houses, the primarily southern belt of Siberia, and technological setback. Of course, we have half of the equipment manufactured by the Western countries, and actually this is an obsolete equipment with software and other things. Also, being a great energy power, we buy turbines from Siemens company. I'm not talking about technological things like used in chemistry or metallurgical industry or whatever is part of our national economy from where we live and with the structure which we have. So in 20 years, we witness the decline manifold times. We don't manufacture anything for light industry. We don't have any equipment for manufacturing cloth. And thirdly, diversification of exports, what could be our advantages? So we cannot expand the export of raw materials, so we need to come up with some new innovative products and capture the markets. If you come up with absolutely new product, you can come up to the market, and this is also part of the long-term strategy. It is being spoken, and it ends up in Skolkovo. They buy most attractive innovations, and again, together with the personnel who does it, small innovative, and they are just settling themselves in some kind of a Silicon Valley. And another thing is going to Mr. Mirkin probably. It is not exactly clear, this financial policy. This is financial mitigation, and we give the money to small business, or are we talking about special investment profile which could be used for financing prospective or promising project? We are inclined to use the second one, to have some mega products. I'll give 30 seconds. Okay, thank you very much, Vladimir. Thank you. Sergei Khistanov, advisor on macroeconomic issues of Open Broker. The author of brilliant comments on most various media, although he's a young individual, but when he gives these comments, it looks like he's very mature. It's a rare thing happening. Yes, 5 minutes. I will start from the end. What needs to be at the tactical horizon, it is necessary to repeat what was already done: new economic policy, deregulation, and mitigation of tax pressure. And as far as the strategic issues are concerned, so we need to offer a new model of economic growth as against the model of economic growth on which we grew up to 2014. And I have three slides. This is the illustration why what I said it is necessary to do. This is the kind of a picture quarterly GDP graph, and we don't have this statistics for this is 1.5%, which actually matches exactly the number of our growth last year. Any growth less than 3% means stagnation, or the so-called zastoy. And what's happening in the Russian economy resembles that the epoch from Mr. Brezhnev towards the Congress which initiated perestroika. Low growth rates, the real level of life goes down, and we see, and in some political events which occur, there was a jubilee, that is the 35th anniversary of the Strategic Defense Initiative time, and from this graph we can see that on the one part we overcame the consequences of the decline last year's 1.5% of the growth, but that exceeds the errors of measures. But we still time about 2 years to change something in Russian economy, or it wants to be changed. I will omit unnecessary slides, and it is necessary not exactly the financial and cash policy, with my respect to Yakov Alexeyevich. This is the picture from the side of Central Bank. All the money which is used in the Russian economy, and generally this number growth, you can ignore these hikes, and you can see the growth from the time of crisis of 2008. It grew 4 times, which exceeds the desire to increase their financial offer, which I heard from the mouth of Mr. Glaziev, but actually the central bank did it himself, and there is a lot of money in the Russian economy, and it's the dynamics of interest rates and dynamics that the interest goes down. It means that there is a lot of money, and there's no need for the banks to raise money from the population. And perhaps this is the slide which responds to the question when there appeared complexities with our economic models. These 2 stock exchange indices. This is S&P, and the white line, this is our index, RTS. And RTS index, although it is a Russian indicator, but it was invented in 1994, and that graph was described in dollars, and that makes it possible to make a comparison between the two. And what do we see? We see that before spring of 2012, those graphs were more or less in correlations. America goes up, we go up, it goes down, we go down. But since spring 2014, America is somewhere there, and we go down and we are somewhere here. Why it happened? The point is that the movement of stock exchange indices, it's a barometer of the behavior of economy, because that is related to the money of strong investors, and they buy these securities. They expect that things will go better, and they buy, and somewhere since spring of 2012, this notorious strong investors, they questioned the basic model of our economy, and in order to approach the trajectory of stable growth, our foreign colleague mentioned that we need to enter into a new paradigm, a new economic model. What kind of model it's going to be, I don't know.
I believe that by May this discussion will be commenced. But this is a diagram which speaks a lot to us, saying that the problems of our say economy started long before the fall of the prices for price, and no sanctions were available at the point in time. And I will take one more time. I would like to show yet one more slide. It's that's my diagram. It's economics. This is the price for oil in dollars of 2013. Looking at this picture, we can see why Lenin was the names of the leaders of our state, why people live Brezhnev, why do not like Gorbachev, why they don't like Brezhnev. The price was going down and the absolute numbers were very low. And what Putin is like, the growth for oil, for price for oil was twice as high. And here we should put a big question mark, and the very behavior of this diagram says that yes, we need to change something, and it would be great that a wide discussion about what to be changed should be started following the formation of the new government. I have come to the limit of my time. Thank you. Well, the last slide was very interesting indeed, and I'm really ashamed that a great nation like ours depends on the price of a barrel of oil. This is not a tolerable situation. So I have two officially speakers, and I have to give them the floor. Well, we have a lady speaker, Maria Okuny. I've never seen this lady before, but in my correspondence I told her that I agree that she, yes, I'm here, thank you. 5 minutes. Yes, I want the presentation to be screened. Presentation, Okunyeva, please. I will be able to squeeze into 5 minutes time. I'm the trainee, postgraduate student of the economic faculty of economics of Moscow University. So the elections are over now, but my subject matter is that we need to choose the strategy for social economic development of Russia. In fact, I missed information that I was supposed to prepare not more 3 slides. That's why I am taking away all my you can use this, highlight some of my slides. So now, as we mentioned several times, now I have the slide changed. Thank you. Now, here in our country, we see a battle between strategies of social economic development of Russia. Short time and long term. Each strategy offers until 2025 and until 2035. We have 2 strategies offered by the expert community. Strategy of growth by Stolypin Club, strategy from the Center of Strategic Development, and 2 strategies offered by government. Strategy of the Ministry of Economic Development and plan of the government. So it intended that the key document for development was the plan of the government, which should absorb either one of the 2 options, in addition of their own proposal, of course, or certain ideas which were developed under the 2 first strategies. And Vladimir Putin familiarized himself with his 3 strategies, but no specific decision was taken, and he postponed this choice until the year after the presidential election, proposed to think what proposals from those strategies could be incorporated in one common strategy. So it is this is the subject matter of my research. I try to look at the strategy to identify the key most important items and to refine them to better understand what their proposals are and what their proposals could be borrowed into the final plan. So the rating here, I have several slides dealing with the analysis of the strategies. So the rating is in the order of descending order in terms of the growth strategy. And the second strategy is the strategy of CSR. So how they correlate with what the CRS strategy speaks of. So one of the two key proposal of the strategy of growth is softening of monetary policy and some other measures associated with the currency exchange rate. And the second aspect is the selection of the priority projects by government and implementation of them on the public-private business foundation and through territorial clusters. These are the two key elements of the two strategies. And okay, let us look what the strategy of CSR proposed. In terms of the monetary policy, the second strategy is not the first item, but the second priority, and the weight of this factor is lower. So this is an item of the policy where two strategies differ a lot. And we also go through this comparison because the rating is done in terms of this growth strategy, and this subject matter is one of the relegated places where the CIR strategy is the first. The social sphere and the labor resources. CIS strategy thinks that the key thrust of our policy government should be to raise the productivity of labor and of the capital, to increase investment in human and physical capital, and to do that, to do a budgetary maneuver to increase the average weight on the expenditure of the state through at the expense of other expenses like defense expenses and so on. So the strategy of growth is in solidarity with this. However, the subject is relegated in the strategy in terms of the strategy. Maria, I think that you characterize both strategy, but what you for what strategy you champion? Well, okay, I will skip all that. I only highlighted key elements. We know this. I conducted scientific research, the various types for monetary policy. I will skip that. You can read it in slides. They proceed from various objectives of the monetary policy. Well, I am skipping. This is a scientific analysis of theoretic models. Please make a choice. Make a choice. Select or make a conclusion. I believe it is that the focus on softening of monetary policy is excessive one. It is not totally correct, but the monetary policy, the first mission is to provide for raise the following of the population and to create conditions for economic growth. How in the strategy of growth there is a number of good proposals in terms of going from the targeting inflation to the flexible inflation targeting or regime of multiple objectives. So the regime of flexible inflation targeting is growing in popularity in countries with high growth rates, and regime of multiple objectives is applicable in the most developed countries. This is my specific proposal. Okay, Maria, thank you very much. You say very correctly. We not target only inflation. Thank you. So we have the last officially listed speaker. Shatar Havilashvili, General Director of the Mostroy company. This is the best construction contractor company, and he came to my institute, and he has please tell us what we are to do. I will not fail to say so. In order to cut the long story short, there's a good beginning. That's a good beginning. They say that the 21st century will be either the century of humanitarian century, or there will not be any life at all in this century. So what I'm going to speak about the humanistic attitude to its population. I want to refer to the words of Putin and to highlight the problem, which way there are more than 2 billion square meters of housing, which requires overhaul, of which 1 billion square meters needs a very urgent overhaul. Why this issue has become a subject matter to do? It affects 2/3 of our population. As of now, only 50 or 70 million square meters of housing is built, which is insufficient, and the situation has been aggravated. So in 2016, they 160 billion were collected, and by the 2070, they collected 200 billions. But in order to complete this program within 5 years, they need to 600 billions a year of investment into the housing development. In each country, they adopted the norms of the class of energy effectiveness. Right now, we continue to build projects which are in line with the class D, which is well behind the world practice. And thus, it means that our people live in an uncomfortable condition. An absurd situation we see in our country. On the left-hand side, we see 6 trillion rubles per 1 billion square meters necessary to do the overhaul. 12 is for the second. So that means that on one hand, we have a huge volume of work to do, which should be done. This is a paid work. But on the other hand, we see bankrupt companies, producers of construction materials, and basically that relates to small and mid-scale companies. About 30% of them go bankrupt or on the brink of bankruptcy. And construction contractors which could do this work, small and mid-sized companies go bankrupt, about 30% of them. So we see at the bottom, to the right-hand side, a good picture, brick house, but what it looks like if you invest into this building, you would turn it into a marvel. I want to say that on one hand, we have a huge volume of work which should be done and which could be paid for, but they extend it in time. But on the other hand, the construction industry and construction material industry go bankrupt. We do speak with a great number of high officials. This is how people address this. So you see the walls become frozen, so they provide thermal insulation. This happens across the entire country. On the left-hand side, Kaliningrad. On the left-hand side, it's house building before repair, maintenance repair, and on the right-hand side is after repair. We spoke to the governor of the Moscow region. They changed the law on housing in that when you define it, now they say it should be that the insulation should be done on compulsory method. We spoke to the Ministry of Construction. We spoke about the draft issue in-house order about the level of energy effectiveness. So what I'm driving at, the attitude to this issue There is understanding, but so far we cannot move it from the idling point. There is a law 261 which abides us to comply with the requirements. But the key issue is the shortage of money, but this funds are available, but they extend it in time. So what we propose to issue target-related securities. It could be bonds that should be used only for the expansion solution of the housing problem. So the situation of crisis one, but this money will be returned. How I think they should look like. The coupon should no less than that of the saving bond, 5 to 6%. Then such bonds will be bought by the population if they guaranteed as let's say when the bank deposits. They should be advertisement in the mass media. They should regions should be advertised in those regions which reach certain results, and the government should give guarantees at the regional level. Then this work will go on. What will be the advantages? Generally, the population at large will benefit more comfortable housing conditions. The quality of life will increase, and the average expectancy of life will also increase. The business will also benefit. They will have jobs, and taxes are paid to the government. Higher turnover of funds for financial institutions in society will also benefit. Our cities will look much better. I'm coming to a close with this beautiful building, beautiful street and beautiful country. It is possible. Well, what I value is your feeling of optimism. Come, friends, we have certain requirements of my speakers. They want to respond to some of the presentation, but I have some requests from this floor. Mr. Fateev, Oleg Fateev. We give you 2 minutes because only because you are director of the furniture factory. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will be brief indeed. Adam Smith said that for the government to become rich, you need peace, low taxes, and some justice. Let us speak about the second, condition. Taxes. We should consider taxes in conjunction with credit policy. Any economist, any businessman understands that to pay taxes for property at inflation for 25% is one, but then to pay tax on property when the inflation rate is 3-4% is different. So the combination of these two moments will increase of the taxation pressure and tight monetary policy on one hand, and on the other hand catastrophic decline of the demand and the consumer market result in a situation that it is not possible to buy machines. I work from 1996, and I have gone through all the crises. Like saying to you that even for 1% today, if they give me interest rate at 1%, nobody would take those loans. Well, it's very simple. I will tell you why. In the year 2012, I bought the processing center for 12 million rubles. But now this processing center, considering the devaluation of the ruble, considering the fact that in Europe there is an inflation, it will cost 10 million. So in 5 or 7 years from now, I will have to replace my processing center to effect common replacement, simple replacement, so 5 million. I did it again for the benefit of the amortization. For the next 5 million, I have to add tax on the income and to pay tax on the say property. What is your recipe? My recipe is as follows. We should introduce investment benefits. If you remember that the growth of the economy in 1999-2021 was associated not only with the devaluation of the ruble, not only with the fact that we started from the zero base, it was also connected with the tax benefits, tax breaks. Secondly, we need to reduce taxes for labor, for payroll. So the expenses on payrolls. So we have 20.
We have 14 working days, and now they are days off. However, business is paying for this. It's 6% from the total time. And the first 3 days should be also compensated during the days of the sick list. But you are paying wages, and do you want them to pay these? Okay, let me. You got 30 seconds. And Belarus, they start working on the 3rd of January, and we are reducing the distance between us and Belarus Republic. We have to reduce the taxes to impose the investment privileges, and now we need to understand how many working and days off we have. We should talk not about the strategy of growth, but how to stop our economy falling into the ditch. If it is not profitable to buy a machine on the enterprise, this is really a disaster. And one of the existence problem, our government doesn't like any kinds of subsidies because they don't know how to differentiate between honest people and dishonest, and they consider everybody dishonest. And the mayor of Elabaka, they showed me the enterprise where the blind people are manufacturing certain electrical components, and they manufacture that, and they had this subsidy that if half of your team are blind, you get very serious privileges for income. And then it was banned, and otherwise they will be fired and they will die in the street. And why have you canceled this subsidy for those who are blind? Yes, it's true. I will explain the following. On Wednesday, we developed these subsidies, and on Thursday, half of the country became blind. And what is your purpose of your existence? You should distinguish the blind people from those who are not blind, and now they made everybody equal, and I call this term as impotent liberalism, and everybody thinks that only if once you impose the subsidies, everybody is going to cheat, and this is not true. Now, one more thing, Tatiana Polivanova also. Do we have this lady here in the hall? No. Okay, that's good. Okay, Mr. Zanyin, a very good friend of mine from St. Petersburg, and from St. Petersburg you cannot joke there. They're serious guys. Well, he's still there. So I want to put some point of optimism, because there are ways how to quickly to start living better. You should cancel the taxes for property. It is first, this property tax is a very bad tax. They developed this property themselves. Then it leads to the bankruptcy under certain circumstances. So the country, which would be really attractive and millions of people should do something, the budget is compensated very easily. You should maintain flat rate, but from all types of income. And actually, I am not paying anything to pension fund, but they made me, and I don't pay to the state nothing. And the social fund, the rich people are not paying their why, and I never asked that. And so again, 200 billion, and I will count more in 3 minutes. So the tax, property tax, it's really a break for the development of the economy. It should be immediately cancelled. Everybody says that they don't need loans, but everybody is asking for loans. So let's do the following. So that should be long-term loans. If people read about the Great Depression of 1929, and the banks started to offer more than the amount of deposits that they were capable to collect, and the banks should be cancelled. You cannot offer loans if they don't raise money for deposits, and so it becomes long-term funds, and you can give it for 5, 10, or even 100 years, because in 27 years the incoming flow of deposits will be more, and this is just to compensate for those who cheat, and they hand over and operate the current money and not the money, because in the current money the margin is better. And that should be discontinued immediately, and there's no need for revolution. And another point, you should cancel the banks from the opportunity to demand the body of the credit. If why banks exist and the client pays several years, and then, but when he gives both the interest and the body of credit, you cannot develop the enterprise. And how to do that? Yes, I also want without any body. We can talk about this. Yes, everybody knows. So the body of the loan shouldn't be paid at the time when the client continues to pay its interest. So this is a matter which is easily settled, but we need to propose a solution which will really help the people. Now, those who wants to get the loan and not to return the body, please sign up on my list. No, as soon as the individual stops paying back the interest, so the bank could demand. The bank Well, yes, the banks give with interest rates of 15. I can, yes, just hold on 20 seconds. All assessment should be done on the parity of the buying power. We are economy number 4 in the world, and the central bank should be cancelled the opportunity to buy the currency, and the resources will remain in the country, and we will have a lot of things. And today, what they make, uh, and who is going to estimate disparity of buying power? This is beyond the limits. Everybody, many people are just insisting on Russia leaving WTO. So why would we need power if you don't abuse this power in your own interests? Nothing will be destroyed. The export of raw materials will be reduced. Everything remains there because we have a positive foreign trade balance, and that's why the income remains there abroad, and we need to discontinue this practice. Okay, we have stopped the discussion. So raise your hands who is supporting this PPS but for Nigmatullin. So that's it. That's it. The point, yes. Now, actually, we have exceeded the timetable, and we need to round up our discussion. And so, who wants to say something? And let's ask the question to Nikolai. We'll reduce the taxes. How should we close the budget? The share of this amount in the GDP, how should we balance the GDP, and what is the share? It's the question goes to you. Specifically for your institute, I prepared a lecture on PPS. Yeah, here it's very easy. When we reduce the tax, what do we expect to see? We expect the growth of the taxable basis, and when we reduce the income tax from 24 to 20%, and those expectations, they are justified. Yes, there was a growth, and it was measured, was justified. 2009 was the year of crisis, and then from 2010 we witnessed the growth, and then 2008 and 2017, if you 0.3%, nothing is there. Now it's the second question. the average annual grade as compared 2008 to 2007, 0.3% there's no growth. And there is no growth. Already the profit, well, what I'm talking is 0.3%. When the taxable base is enlarged, so there is a growth. What happens as of 2012? Those were the disproportions. You cannot do it once and you will be growing for 25 years, and you insist that 2010, 11, and 12 ensured this growth by the reduction of taxes. I think it's one of the measures. It's an important measure, and I said more than once about this. And this is one of the measures calculated, and what will be the share of what is the share of this growth as of 4%. And this is the matter which was calculated. And next point. Next, Mr. Mirkin is going to let me say something here. The management of economy is a matter of engineering, and there should be macroeconomic engineers who have the set of tools, and as well as the tools in the real industry. They see how other engineers act under similar circumstances. And we have published a book and studied as engineers how economies which are in difficult situations, how they start growing fairly quickly. And I tried to give this formula again as far as taxes are concerned. So when we analyze separate types of taxes, this is necessary. But for us, it is important the kind of the tax burden, what kind of a tax burden presses the economy. And in Russia, all types of taxes and payments and quasi-taxes, it's 37–40% of the GDP, and this is extremely excessively high. This is at the level of countries of continental Europe, of France, which grow by different speeds. And our studies demonstrate that in order to make this horse run fast and win prices, the tax burden should be lesser, and that should be done because business will have more resources to invest. And we, for Russia, we recommend the tax burden at least 33% of GDP, meaning that this growth and definitely the taxable basis will grow. I will give you China. In China, the tax burden is fairly low. Your pension system is not developed at 26% of GDP, with the accumulation 46% of GDP. And we have absolutely vice versa. We have 40% the tax burden and 21% it's a norm of investment. we have statistics of Rostov.
Okay, so that is why, from the standpoint of taxation, there might be many tools in terms of specific tools and payments. But it is important for us what is the total burden. If Ruslan Semyonovich allows me, no, you won't, Ruslan. I need 2 minutes. 1 minute. 2, 1, okay. The body of the credit. So the future, we will now learn our future when the government is appointed in May. That is true. All my contacts, nobody now can tell me what kind of government will be appointed in May. There are 4 possible versions. First version is going to administrative economy, mobilization economy, and increase growth, the roles of those. The second scenario is what we have now. Same government, semi-closed stagnation economy, where the role of government will be increased, and where another crisis will come, where industrialists would offer its own mechanism or recipe, personal, how to address this issue. The third scenario, something like situation in France during the Franco time. Same system, but with huge investments in infrastructural projects, a partial liberalization for business to be able to survive. And the fourth scenario, with minimal chances that it may exist, I try to give in the formula of growth a situation when the money, credit, and interest rates is only a part in the systemic treatment which a doctor appoints. There is infrastructure which used, budget investments, reduction of tax burden, and great tax breaks. This is the systemic treatment which we are looking for when we go to a doctor. We don't want to treat only one sore. No. Okay. I am closing our conference. It has already extended beyond all thinkable time. You see that there are many recipes, and there are a number of good advices. But I would like to say something in this connection. Failures of our reforms stem from our genetic quality of absence of not our inability to come to terms among ourselves. We all want to save Russia, but if you want to save it not in the way I want to save it, then let Russia perish. And this is terrible, this is horrible. Well, each proposal has some positive elements. We are not populists here who can offer simple solutions for a very difficult problem. So we need to listen to each other and to agree on something, and without not to say strongly believe only in the correctness of your position. I think this is our genetic feature, which is something we should always take into account. But I would like to say that I am happy with our discussion of today. Perhaps there were too many professionals in the among speakers. Perhaps they should be twice as many. I thank you all for your patience, for your courage, and for the attention to what we are doing here. Sometimes it was disorganized, but it was nice and instructive for me. Thank you. We continue our forum.